Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Garage Time TV. I am Marshall, and today we are doing some X19 related stuff. We're not necessarily working on our 86 Bertone X19, but we're actually going to do a disassembly and inspection of the original engine that was in this car. Now, if you have not seen any of these videos from this playlist, I'll make sure to drop it down in the description down below to kind of see where we're at. But this engine was originally in our 86 locked solid. But when I bought the car, it did come with a good running engine, and we did a swap on that. Again, that's all going to be on the playlist, so make sure you guys do that. But what I want to do is dive into this engine, take it apart, and see if it's really even worth saving. Some of the parts have been robbed off of it to complete the engine that came with it. Some stuff has also been taken off, like the alternator is already removed, some of the heater lines are cut off, the cover is just straight missing, and some of the intake pieces are already removed. Now again, this engine is locked solid, so I'm not going to really hold my hopes out for much, but I want to see what's going on, and maybe it is something that we can save. We've already taken the transmission apart, and man, was that thing a greasy mess. So supposedly, this engine has about 113,000 miles on it, according to the odometer in the 86 that had this engine. The new engine we put in there has about 65,000 miles on it, supposedly. Quote unquote supposedly. But what I want to do is start taking some of this stuff off and start going through the inspection. I just want to put out there straight out the gate, I am no expert by any means. I am not a professional. I am not a machinist. I am not an engine builder. I'm not even a car builder. I just happen to do some stuff and it works out. I've done a couple engines for 124s, but I've never dove into an X19 engine. So I just want to put that out there that, just take this with a grain of salt. We're just going to do an inspection here and see what we come into. It would be really nice if we could actually rebuild this engine if it's good enough. I'm kind of thinking that it's going to need a bore just because it is so locked up, but maybe it's not as bad as it seems. Again, we won't know until we dive into it. But I do want to do a couple things. I want to show you what we're working with to start, and then we can start ripping some stuff off, like the intake and all that good stuff, and we can take a look at our cam and all that stuff there. Again, I'm not holding my breath for this thing, but we'll only know until we tear into it. So let's get started. So what I want to start doing is just removing our intake, and half the battle has already been done for us, as one of these is missing. Now this engine was actually part of, some of the parts were taken off to put on our current engine to get it all complete. The alternator is already removed, and we had to replace one of those intake pieces. But what I want to do is just remove as much as possible, including all the leaves and pine needles. And so that way we can get into our cam box. I want to see what our camshaft looks like, if that's any good. Make sure nothing crazy looking there. And then down into the cylinders. So first things first is removing this intake, which I think is already unbolted. It's just held on by these vacuum lines in hopes and dreams. So we can get these removed and get it taken off of here. Like that. We'll also be testing the tensile strength of our throttle, because everything else was taken off except for this. So we've got to remove this little retainer here. That goes around the ball on top, and should all come off. Alright, now it should come off like that with the gasket in pieces. And we're going to keep all the leaves for memories. Just kidding, we're going to throw that all away. One thing I do want to make sure of as we're diving into this is I always start labeling stuff. So if you've got like sandwich bags or snack bags, Ziploc bags, you can write on the bags what the parts are, stuff like that. That really makes the job a lot easier. You can even do, like a cardboard boxes or the little plastic trays from Harbor Freight, whatever you got. We just want to make sure that we're labeling stuff properly as we start diving through it. But with that half of that intake already removed, we got the whole top end out of the way. And I want to look at this camshaft, because this is going to tell us kind of the health of the engine. And again, this is the original engine that was in the X now, but I'm not holding my breath, because this thing was locked up tighter than Fort Knox. It was not moving, and even to this day it's not moving. I soaked this thing down for a few days, got nothing. I even tried it before when we had it on the stand here before I even started recording, and it's still super locked up. So no luck on that front. I'm really hoping it's just some trash and debris in the cylinders. That'll actually make it really nice. So we're gonna see what we come up with once we remove all these. So we're probably gonna need to give this a little tap. There are some washers on here. Wasn't able to get all of them. Well, maybe I can. Nope, wants to fight me. So we're gonna take our dead blow and just give this a little bit of a tap because this thing has been sealed for 40 years. Well, come on now, just show me what you got. I was trying to get some movement. There we go. I don't want to use too much prying force and risk of cracking it, but just a little bit won't hurt. There we go. Just got to crack that seal. That valve cover gasket. There we go. No, we already lost one of those washers, but oh well. Alright, let's see what we got. Well, come on. Why are you so difficult? Oh, because the gasket is sticking. At least it was still sealed, I guess, after all these years. Just... ooh, boy. Yeah, I'm not really liking what I'm seeing. It's really kind of a good thing we didn't get this running. Unfortunately, we did have to pull that cam box just to get to these other head bolts. I really thought we were going to be able to get around it, but we had to pull it. There's a couple things that I do notice is there's oil in it, so that's a good start, that everything's been sitting in oil, which is a little nice. But I do notice that a couple of these little buckets and shims have some pretty significant, I don't know if they're like rust rings or what it is, but they're not super dimpled. You know, I'll bring you in here in a second. But these little buckets cover the valves. And so there's a shim in top, this little disc. And this bucket is what travels up and down inside that cam box. When the cam pushes down on it, it will engage the valve and open and close it over and over again. And so sometimes these little shims, which will adjust your gap, will actually start to get a little concave pattern in them. And that will be significant wear, meaning your valve isn't opening enough and your cam is starting to wear out. You'll see signs of that. But again, just from sitting for so long, I think it's just a lot of moisture or whatever that was in the system. It's really only these two in the back, one here in the middle, another one here in the middle, and then number one as well, it's got one. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut this elbow for the coolant from the water pump, because we're not going to need it. And I'm sure this is going to be full of surprises, and it's rock hard.
That's what she said.
But all of our head bolts are removed. They're all loose. I can pull them out by hand. So I'm going to show you these valve cups, the little buckets, and the shims, so you can see the wear marks that I'm seeing. Oh, there we go. You got any surprises for me? What you got? Well, I see lots of orange. We're just gonna close that back up and not look at that either. So let me bring you in. We'll take a look at these valve buckets, and then we'll also take a look at the tops of the valves to see if there's any significant wear or anything like that. Now this is really, really important, is that these have to stay in the orientation that they're at. Each one may have the same shims, which is highly unlikely, but they'll have different shim thicknesses of this little disc on the top. They can be interchanged for tolerance and things like that, but we have to orient these as they are because they're set for that camshaft. Now if we get a new camshaft and the stock one, we could probably be within tolerance on these, but we have to keep these where they're at. So it's very, very important. So let's bring you in, we'll take a look at it, and then we'll start laying them out in order. We'll start here in number 4, here in the back of the engine. You can see these, the glare doesn't get it, these rings that are in there. They look like rust rings, but they're not worn. So they're still pretty flat. And the top of the valve looks good. You want to make sure that you got both keepers. That's really important, that the spring isn't offset or anything like that. Look, doesn't have any big, dips in the top of the valve stem or anything like that. So far it's looking okay. These cups are just worn. This one looks really normal, I want to say. It looks pretty good. Top of that valve looks alright. Yeah, so we're just going to check these. Just want to make sure that we're not missing anything. You see this one's got some funky round in it. And the number 1 here as well. Got some targeting in there. So I don't see anything that suggests the cam is wiping out these shims. But all the keepers are there, so that's also a good sign. So I think what happened is it's just sat for so long that the moisture got in through some open valves and in through the intake and exhaust ports and just started to rust out the cylinders on the inside. But it's going to make a mess, which is going to be fantastic all over this floor. So I'm going to sweep so you don't have oil and dirt making a slurry on the floor. So we're going to sweep this up, put down probably some of this paper. Hold on to that for that specific reason. Put it down so it'll catch some of this stuff as we take this off. I'm really curious to see what these cylinders look like. So we've got our handy paper down and we cut this hose, so we should be able to lift the head right off. Alright, take your bets now of what this is going to look like. I hear some stuff dropping already onto the paper. It sounds like awful rust. Oh yeah. That's really nice, actually. Take a look at that cylinder head in a minute, but this is yeah, not very promising. I will say the one positive thing though, you can stay positive, is that penetrating fluid from about 6 to 8 months ago is still sitting in it, and these coolant channels don't look super great, but there's definitely some good stuff in here. So let me soak this in for a second, and I'll bring in for a better look.
A few moments later.
I think we should start with the most optimistic cylinder, and that's number 4, which is interesting because those valve shim pieces had the most interesting wear on them. But you can see inside here there's this rust ring. Don't look ahead now. There's this rust ring in there. That's really what's keeping these cylinders in place. But this right now is our best looking one, and then you look to the right and you can see which one had open valves, because that is, oh yeah, we're just making all sorts of good stuff here. That is all sorts of goodness. It's pretty intense. And then number 2, not looking any better at all. Yeah, that's pretty crusty too. And then we can swim in number 1. But I will say it's penetrating fluid. And I guess to be positive is that it held, which means that the rings are sealed, I guess. So I don't know if we want to try and get this thing turning now that we got the head off. I don't know. I think that may be worth a shot. Is we can go backwards on some of these, go down on 2 and 3 because those are attached, and then 1 and 4 are attached. So if those 2 go down, then 1 and 4 are going to come up while these go down. And I think these have the best shot for moving upwards at least, but can't really see inside of our soup mixture here on number 1.
Oh God, it's so good. So good.
So we're just going to cross our fingers on that one and look at Mount Crustmore here. Yeah, that wasn't doing anything for us. So I think we'll give it a shot. In better news though, head gasket looks pretty good. I don't see any like blow by between cylinders. I don't see any of the rings blown out. So that's a more positive note, I guess, is that it wasn't overheating despite all of this horrible brown goo everywhere. So let's see if we can actually get this thing to turn over. Now there's no valves to worry about. And then we'll look at the underside of that head, because I'm sure it's just as entertaining to look at. But also I want you to note how crusty our bearing is here. That it's still got rust, and our belt has dust on certain places, and not on others where it was resting against the pulley, but dust everywhere else. So this thing had not moved in a very, very long time, and I'm sure if I cut this, I could just recreate this pattern. It's just stuck to the pulleys. And this water pump is not going to be any better, I guarantee it. So let's, just for the heck of it, let's see if we can get these to go up and down and get some movement on it. See what we can do. So we've had a quick change of plans. As I was getting ready to do that, I had an epiphany that said, no, don't do that. 1, because we're going to have to get the pistons out of the cylinders, which is going to be fun enough on its own. And 2, if I actually get that moving, I run the risk of really damaging the cylinders by dragging that rust particles up and down the cylinder walls as we get that spinning. And I definitely don't want to do that, especially if we think that this is something that could potentially, as of right now, I'm not really holding my breath on, to be rebuildable. But instead, let's take a look at the back side of the cylinder head. Put down more of our trusty paper, because there is lots of oil up here, and it's going to make a horrendous mess. So rather than doing the right thing and dumping it all out, I just grabbed some paper and said, this is good enough. Here we go. Oh yeah. I'm actually pleasantly surprised. Just a little bit of carbon, but they're all, well, they're okay. They don't look bad. Just a little bit of carbon and some rust in number 3, but let me show you what they look like up close. So this would be number 1, since I'm looking at it upside down. This is the front of the engine. Number 1, 2, well, I thought it was number 3. This is number 2, 3, and 4. Number 2 is the only one that has that rust, which would make sense because that's number 2 over there looks really bad as well. But the coolant channels look good, the oil channels look good, spark plug holes look all good. Just a lot of carbon buildup just from running it, and it's fuel injected, so it naturally runs a little bit more rich, which we're going to see that carbon. The other good thing is I noticed the oil is really, really clean, which is a nice sign. So hopefully that'll be a good thing for us too. But the head doesn't look bad. Definitely something that we could clean up and probably run back on it. But the real trick is this thing. So I think next is going to be pull the distributor, which the nut's already off. Little hold down. This actually drives your oil pump. There's a little groove on the bottom. If I remove this, on the bottom of it, that gear is actually what spins your oil pump. That's what's down there, and that gets oil pressure and all that good stuff. So I'm going to set that down here, and we're going to have to drain the oil out of it because I will forget. And if I flip this upside down, oil is going to come running out the galleys, which I don't want. So we'll drain the oil, and then we'll flip this thing over, let it make a huge mess on the floor, pull off the oil pan and start looking at the connecting rods and thinking about possibly getting those pistons out, but cross your fingers on that one. So I drained the oil and it looked brand new, which was a really nice thing to find out of all this negative. But I started to turn the engine sideways, as you can see here, and some coolant came out, so I was on that drip in the drain pan, and all the fluid from our number 1 cylinder started to come out. And that's when I had the strange epiphany. I know it's going to be really weird to hear this, but yeah, I think this engine is completely toast. The cylinders are just awful. Number 1 looks like Taco Bell for the next day, and it's not something you want to see in your cylinder at all. And it's pretty bad. I can stir it around and the coolant doesn't look good, and I can only imagine what down inside the block along the outer cylinder walls on the inside look like. So I think we're gonna have to call it on this engine that is basically a boat anchor. But I think just for exploratory and want to see what else is wrong with this thing, now we're gonna pull off the oil pan. So I'm gonna let this finish dripping here. I'm gonna flip it over and take a look at the crank, because I think there are some parts on this that are salvageable. That would be something like the, well, we could save the alternator. That's a start, the alternator. Oh, the cam pulley. That's good. The cam box itself was okay. The intake pieces. We use the exhaust manifold on the new car. The dipstick. So see, there's some positive to this, but let's flip it and see if we can get any worse, which I think is a famous line that you're not supposed to say, but let's just see what we've got. So I got this thing flipped over, and it literally just spewed its guts everywhere, all over our brown paper, and you can see the black loveliness that was in those cylinders and the rust water, and you know how wonderful everything looks. Just adding insult to injury to this poor engine, but that is really gross. I'm actually really glad we didn't get this thing unstuck, because it would have been horrible. But let's zip these off, bust off this oil pan, and see what it looks like. Well, the oil pan is off, and the good news is our oil pan pickup is not full of gunk and goo, which is a good sign. But down on the back sides of those cylinders underneath, you can see some oil that, when we flipped it over, all kind of sunk down in there. But I will say the positive thing is it's stuck in a position where we can actually get to all the connecting rod nuts and bolts, so it's kind of nice. But then you turn and look at the pan, and we've got a little bit of milkshake going on. Which is surprising considering the oil looked so good. But I think that's, yeah, that's the good stuff right there. And there's a lot of buildup in here, so definitely suggesting that 113,000 miles that are on it. So I think we'll go one more step, because I honestly don't think I'm going to be able to push those pistons out to look at the cylinders without really like ripping them up. So we'll take off these caps here and look at the bearings and see if they're worn out to suggest the mileage is accurate. I have a strong suspicion that it is, but we'll take off a couple of these and see what the bearings look like and how good or bad, which I'm probably expecting them to be. I was able to pull out number 4 and number 1 connecting rod for the pistons. Number 2 and 3 are just too close to that side of the block. You just can't slide the end caps off. But number 4 here, definitely worn. Definitely worn. And number 1 almost looks identical. Definitely worn. That's silver, and there's definitely a wear mark. If you get down to like the copper color, that means they're severely worn and definitely need to be replaced. But if you're this far, you might as well replace those. But let's take a look at the, grab this, crank side of it. But I do have hope for this crank though, because that looks really good, despite the wear on the bearings. This means the bearings took all the wear and tear of that, which is great. So I'm guaranteeing number 2 and 3 look identical to that. I'm not going to pull off the caps for the crankshaft, you know, with everything literally just falling off as I barely bump into this thing, but it is really gross. And I think we have confirmed that the mileage on it is absolutely accurate, 113,000, definitely worn and used. I do want to correct myself on something. Is this gear here, it's like your auxiliary gear, is actually what drives your oil pump, not the distributor. The distributor is turned off of this assembly here. If you look down right in there, you might be able to see the gears that turn the top of the oil pump, and that oil pump spinning is what turns the distributor. So when I correct myself on that, I know earlier I had said that the distributor is what turns the oil pump. That's not right. Anyway, but we definitely made ourselves a mess here. But I wanted to know what was going on with this engine. I know a lot of people have been asking about it, and this thing is just totally no good. Could we bore it out and get a little bit bigger pistons in it, you know, and get a better camshaft, you know, kind of see with compression and make a little bit more performance? I'm sure we could, but it's not really budget oriented. I mean, I could make this whole motor performance and then do the whole swap, and then I've got the other engine. It just, I really like driving the one the way that it is. And I've built a couple engines, but there's a lot of common connections between this and the 124 with the dual cam, so I feel like I'd be repeating myself. But, you know, this is kind of the mess of things, but you got to dive into it and see what's going on, because there's no way we're going to get that to turn with those cylinders looking that way. Well, guys, I think that's going to be the end of this episode. You know, I was really anticipating this to be a little bit more exciting and something that was actually within reason to be rebuilt. I'm not saying that it's not impossible, because it totally can be rebuilt. It's just not something that I think I really want to do. So I think what I'll end up doing here is kind of cleaning it out, you know, blowing out the cylinders and trying to leave them in a little bit better condition, and just kind of button everything back up together. I'm not going to torque everything or anything like that, just really kind of throw it back together and just put it back, you know, in the corner for now. I'll definitely keep that transmission. It's good to have an extra transmission just in case, but the engine I'm not, you know, super worried about. You know, if you're interested in this engine, I mean, this is as exposed as it gets. You can send me an email at garagetimetv@gmail.com. You know, I'm in Texas, so you will need to come get it. I'm not going to ship this thing. It's definitely not worth it to me to do all that hassle. If you want it, you can come get it. You know, we can talk through email if you're really that interested in it. But with that, that's going to be the end of this episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe. Subscribing really helps the channel. Only about 25% of the people that watch the channel are subscribed. So if you're part of that 75%, please make sure you subscribe. Make sure you follow me on social media with Instagram and Facebook, all that good stuff. We have a Facebook group, so make sure you join that as well. And check down in the description for all of our useful links. Our merchandise website is down there. Some coupon codes for LED headlights, all that kind of good stuff are down in the description. So make sure you check that out. Again, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, we'll see you.